You know that person who keeps starting over? Big dreams, new plan, new promise that this time will be different. They think about it so much it almost feels real, and then nothing happens. If you just thought of someone, or worse, if you just thought of yourself, I get it. Because I used to be that person. I'd plan, imagine, feel like I was making progress, and somehow end up exactly where I started. It's not laziness, and it took me a long time to understand what it actually is. And if you're anything like I was, you've had the plan, you've had the vision. Maybe you've had 10 versions of the plan, but somehow the plan keeps changing and the starting never happens. This isn't another video telling you to just start or to believe in yourself harder. What I found, after years of being stuck in that exact same loop, is something a psychologist spent 20 years proving. And to see what she found, start with something you've probably done 100 times. Monday, 11 p.m., you open a new tab, Best Productivity Apps 2026. By Wednesday, you've read 14 articles, downloaded 3 apps, and set up color-coded folders for a project that still has 0 words in it. And somehow, you feel like you've made progress. That voice in your head, the one that goes, I'll start Monday, or let me just get organized first, or I need to do a bit more research before I begin. That voice? Something weirder than procrastination. Here's what's actually happening. Every time you plan, organize, research, or prepare, your brain releases the same satisfaction chemicals as if you'd actually done the thing. Your nervous system quietly checks, done, except nothing is done. There's a name for this, phantom progress, the feeling of moving forward while standing perfectly still. You sit down, you make the plan, you feel that little rush of accomplishment, and then you close the laptop because as far as your brain is concerned, the work is already finished. You're not preparing, you're performing preparation, and the audience is just you. And what makes this worse, phantom progress doesn't just waste your time, it drains the exact same energy you'd need to actually start. You're running a marathon in your head and wondering why your legs won't move. Now, this isn't pop psychology. This isn't a clever metaphor someone came up with on the internet. A researcher spent 2 decades, her entire career basically, proving exactly how this mechanism works. And what she found should probably be taught in schools. Her name is Gabrielle Oettingen. She's a professor at NYU, and she spent 20 years studying one question. What happens inside your mind when you fantasize about success? The answer isn't what you'd expect. She ran a study, took people who wanted to achieve a goal, lose weight, get a job, ace an exam, and split them into groups. One group visualized the positive outcome, really felt it. The other group visualized the outcome and the obstacles standing in the way. The group that only imagined success, they performed worse. Not the same, worse. Worse than people who didn't visualize anything at all. Because when you vividly imagine achieving something, your brain doesn't register it as a goal. It registers it as done. Your blood pressure literally drops, your energy drops, your motivation, the actual fuel you need, evaporates before you even begin. Oettingen called the missing piece mental contrasting, but the part most people miss is that positive fantasy alone actually works against you. Your daydream isn't pushing you forward, it's telling your nervous system the finish line is already behind you. And if that sounds familiar, it's because you've been doing it, maybe for years. Every plan you made that felt so real you didn't need to act on it, that was this. That was your brain mistaking the rehearsal for the performance. So if the science proves that fantasizing about outcomes makes you less likely to achieve them, why do you keep doing it? This is the part nobody talks about. The loop isn't just a bad habit, it's an addiction. Every time you imagine the future version of yourself, the one who's disciplined, productive, finally has it together, your brain gives you a small hit of dopamine, and that hit feels exactly like accomplishment. So you come back, tomorrow, next week, you plan again, you imagine again, you get the hit again. This is rehearsal addiction, the compulsive need to rehearse being someone you never actually become because the rehearsal itself is the reward. And over time, something flips. You stop planning because you want to start. You start planning because you don't want to. The fantasy becomes the hiding place. That's dopamine inversion, when the chemical that was supposed to drive you forward starts pulling you away from the thing you actually want. And now layers social media on top of this. 3 a.m., bathroom. You're watching someone's I quit my 9 to 5 reel for the 4th time this week, and your brain does the same thing as when you plan. It registers their success as partly yours. You watch the transformation video. You feel inspired. You feel like something shifted. Nothing shifted. This is fantasy training. You're watching someone else's success story and borrowing their dopamine without even realizing it. And every time you do, the gap between where you are and where you want to be gets a little wider and a little more comfortable. Comfortable enough to keep going for years. I want to tell you about someone. Let's call her Monica. She's 28. She's had the same business idea for 4 years. She's written it down in 9 different notebooks. She's told her friends about it so many times they've stopped asking. She's not lazy. She's one of the smartest people in any room she walks into. And every night she opens her laptop, tweaks the plan, feels that familiar little glow, and closes it. Monica doesn't have a motivation problem. She has version 1.0 phobia, the terror that the first real attempt won't be perfect, so she never attempts at all. And she knows exactly what she's doing. That's the worst part. And maybe you heard Monica's story and thought, that's not me. Or maybe, and this is the harder thing to sit with, you thought, that's exactly me. Because at some point, this stops being about what you do. It becomes about who you are. You're not just someone who plans too much. You've become someone whose entire relationship with ambition is performative. Call it ambition theater. You have the vision, you have the language, you have the aesthetic of someone who's going places. But backstage, nothing's moving. And you know it. You've known it for a while. And the uncomfortable truth? This pattern didn't start with you. It didn't start in college or at your first job. It started much, much earlier than that. Think about it. When you were a kid, back in grade school, what got you praised? Not finishing things, not the messy, ugly first attempt at something. You got praised for being smart, for having the answer, for showing potential. You learned something very specific in those years. Looking like you're going to do something great is safer than actually trying and risking being average. The gold star was always for knowing, never for doing. And 20 years later, you're still chasing that same gold star. You plan because planning feels like knowing. You prepare because preparing feels like being smart. You organize, research, outline, because all of that feels like the thing without the risk of actually being the thing. You were trained to perform progress before you could even spell the word. So what do you do with all of this? I'm not going to tell you to just start. We've already established that doesn't work. But I will say this. The way out of ambition theater is a worse plan. Version 1.0, the ugly, embarrassing, not quite ready version of the thing you've been perfecting in your head for years. The version you'd never show anyone. That's the one that matters. Because the moment you do something badly, you break the loop. Phantom progress can't survive contact with reality. The rehearsal ends when the performance, the real, messy, imperfect performance, finally begins. It was never laziness, it was protection. And the fact that you're still here, that you watched this far, that means something. Not because you're ready, but because maybe for the first time, you saw yourself clearly enough to stop rehearsing. And that, honestly, is the hardest version 1.0 of all.